Winning Blueprint presents.
In the lab room, the market.
Welcome to the market. You're in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the market, the NFL's one-stop shop for all positions related to the field. Here to talk to you today about the AFC South. It's the week in review, week one of the NFL free agency period, otherwise known as in the lab room, the market. And so a lot of activity going on in the first week of free agency, here to chronicle it all and really give you a recap of what went on in the AFC South. And in front of you, right here, you'll see I have a comprehensive spreadsheet that I put together with every team in the National Football League on it. And among the topics on this list are players that were released. Then you have free agent signees. Then you have re-signees. These are the players that re-signed with their current teams. And then you have players lost in free agency, the ones that got away, that ended up signing with other teams around the league. And so we'll talk about all those topics here with every team in the AFC South. I've broken these down into divisions, and we'll go through each team in the division one by one individually. And so we'll start off in the AFC South with the Houston Texans,
Houston, Texas.
your division winners from the 2012 season. And I'll be using my handy dandy trusty big board as a reference as I'll be looking at my spreadsheet when talking to you at all times. And so let's talk about the Houston Texans and what they were able to do in the first week of free agency. So we'll look at the release players category for the Houston Texans and just Kevin Walter. They let go their longtime number 2 receiver, and the Texans have been receiver starved for a long time now, and they need some help. Andre Johnson has been holding it down out wide for years now, and they could use another able body out wide to give him some help, to take some pressure off of Dre. He's been out there balling for about a decade now with no help, and much like Larry Fitzgerald, he needs other guys around him to step up. Larry Fitzgerald had help at one time with Anquan Bolden and with Early Doucette and that crew when Kurt Warner was there, but ever since, he's really never had that number 2 guy to help him out and take pressure off of him. Neither has he had a quarterback. At least Andre Johnson has that, but he needs a number 2. Kevin Walter has been there for a while. He's now gone. So that's the only player that the Texans have released. You look at the free agent signee category, Texans have not signed a single player in the first week of free agency. Not very surprising, as their GM, Rick Smith, is very good at his job. He knows what this team needs, what they don't need. He's been there long enough to know they have money under the cap. So from that standpoint, kind of surprising. But this Texans team, they don't need a lot of stuff. And so they need a few items that can put them over the top. I would have liked to have seen them go after a guy like Brandon Gibson, however. Someone that could come in and help bolster that receiving core. Maybe he thinks that the guys that they drafted last season, a guy like Lestar Jean that's been there for about 3 seasons, or one of the guys like DeVere Posey or Keyshawn Martin was someone that could step in at that number 2 receiver. I don't believe that at all, but we'll see. The one guy out of that group that I thought had some potential might have been DeVere Posey. He tore his ACL in the playoffs. He won't be back anytime soon, so there's a void there at that number 2 position for receiver, and I thought they should have addressed that in free agency. But maybe they have other ideas. Maybe they want to go after someone in the draft. Whatever the case may be, the Texans have nothing going on in that department. So you look at the re-signees department, and again, not a lot of activity for the Houston Texans. Here they have Philip Supernall and Andrew Gardner, 2 guys you've probably never heard of. These are 2 guys that were probably on the practice squad at some point, and so they'll be back with the Texans again. They probably like what they saw out of these guys and want to keep them around. So there you have that. And so you move on to lost in free agency. And teams have been picking off of the Texans roster. If you're not going to re-sign your own stuff, we don't mind taking them off of your hands if you don't want them. And so teams were very active in picking off of this Texans roster. And it's a really good roster. They have a lot of solid players. Hey, look, when you win your division and you win a postseason game 2 years in a row, you have a pretty good roster. And if you're not going to re-sign your own people, other teams will come and pick your players off one by one. And that's what happened to the Texans. As James Casey, your fullback / tight end. He's a hybrid guy, someone that was very, very versatile for you in the 2012 season. Gone. He's now in Philadelphia. Chip Kelly, like what he saw, thinks he's a good fit for that offense in Philadelphia. They snatched him up. Now they don't have James Casey anymore. You look at another guy that's gone. Connor Barwin. This is someone I thought they needed to have back. I don't know if the Texans were willing to spend the kind of money that Connor Barwin got from the Philadelphia Eagles. Looks like the Eagles like shopping at the Houston Texans store. They went and got James Casey. They came back and double dipped and got Connor Barwin, gave him a 6-year, $36 million deal. Don't know if the Texans really wanted to pony up that kind of money to Connor Barwin. Can't say that I blame him, but he was a big piece of what they were doing. Had an off season, a down season in 2012. Wasn't as productive as he was in 2011. Doesn't matter. He still was a good player for them, a solid defender. Thought they should have tried to make a play to get him back. They never really did. I don't think the offer was really there. And so he's now a Philadelphia Eagle. You look at the next guy that's gone, Justin Forsett. He was a nice little change of pace back for the Texans. Thought that he was solid in the 2012 campaign when they weren't getting it from Arian Foster, when they weren't getting it from Ben Tate. They were getting it from Justin Forsett. He stays in the division. Again, it's funny how this happens. Teams in the division see your players. They see what you do with them, and they like what they see, and they pick off of your roster. He's going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar now, is Justin Forsett. And so he will no longer be a Houston Texan. You look at another guy gone, Alan Ball. Here's another guy that I guess Jacksonville was really interested in, and they saw him up close and personal, decided that, hey, this guy can help us. He's now with the Jacksonville Jaguars, so they lose a corner in Alan Ball. And then also you look at another guy that the Texans lost in the offseason, and I thought this was a huge loss. This was the biggest loss of any of their departures in free agency, and that was Glover Quinn. Here's a guy that was really good for you at the safety position. I mean, he's young, he's talented. He was the best thing you had smoking in that safety position. He's now gone, and so I thought the Texans were going to make a play, were going to do everything in their power to hold on to Glover Quinn. And it just never seemed that way. From the outset of free agency, he was off and running. I guess he felt like, look, you had every opportunity to get my services back. You didn't do so. Now it's the free agency period. I'm going to test the market and see what's out there for me. And he made several stops before landing in Detroit, and he liked what he heard in Detroit. And there was a day, I believe it was the second day of free agency, where the Lions just went crazy and signed about 4 players. Glover Quinn was one of them. And now he's going to be gone from the Texans, and now he's going to be playing for the Detroit Lions. A big, huge void now in the secondary for the Houston Texans. That was going to sting because I already thought that they were lacking at the safety position. And he was the one piece that you could say, yeah, this guy's really good. They have Danielle Manning back there, but I'm not really enamored with Danielle Manning. I think he's a great guy in the return game, but as a defender, I'm really not that big on Danielle Manning. And so I think this was a huge loss for the Texans, but he's gone as well. And so that's it for the Texans. A very quiet offseason thus far for the Houston Texans. Haven't really made a lot of moves. Maybe they're waiting for the latter stages of free agency when guys start to come on the cheap. Maybe they were looking to really do a lot of damage in the draft. I don't know what Rick Smith and company are thinking right now in Houston, but they need some pieces. You can't just take the same team that you had last year and the year before that and go back into battle again because you weren't good enough last year to win. And I don't think you're going to be good enough without some upgrades to this team. So I think they'll make some moves. They'll address some of their needs in the draft. I think they still have some work to do in free agency. I wouldn't be surprised if now you start to see teams like the Texans who haven't really done a lot of things in free agency that have some money and some flexibility to work with start making some moves in the later stages of free agency. In the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see the Texans move in and get guys on the cheap, I think, is what they're waiting on. And so it's going to be interesting because they need a right tackle. They could use a number 2 receiver. They're going to need a safety now to replace the absence of Glover Quinn. They could use another fullback. They just lost James Casey. So they're going to have to start to replace some of the stuff they lost in free agency. And I think they'll be aggressive moving forward in free agency, and that's going to do it for the Houston Texans in the market.
Indianapolis Colts.
So as we continue on with the AFC South, the next team up is the Indianapolis Colts. And if everyone wants to award the offseason first weekend of free agency to the Miami Dolphins, I'd say that it's a tie, because this next team up that I'm about to talk about, to me, has done the most damage in free agency thus far. And I think they improved their team more so than anyone else in free agency. And look, they won 11 games last season. It's not like they were a 6-10, 7-9, 5-11 team and they really had a lot of work to do. They won 11 games, and so they knew they needed to upgrade their team, though. And that's the beauty of what the Colts are doing right now. The Indianapolis Colts, yes, the Indianapolis Colts have done, to me, the best work in free agency in the first week. They went in the market with a game plan, and they went out and they spent money, but they didn't spend it foolishly. And a lot of these teams went out and gave out big contracts. And again, when you don't have a good team, when you're not a winning program, you have to overpay sometimes. I get that. And I understand the nature of the beast. That's what you have to do sometimes. But the Colts won 11 games. They're used to winning. When Peyton Manning was there, they were a double-digit winning team every season. Now that Andrew Luck's there, seems like nothing has changed. It's just a different quarterback, but the same results. They win in his rookie campaign. They win 11 games. And so the Colts have a lot of potential. And I thought that they did it with a lackluster roster a season ago. I didn't think anything on their roster outside of Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne was special. Yet they still won 11 games. And so something must be said for the coaching job. Something must be said for some of the guys that they had on their roster that really stepped up. I really didn't think that T.Y. Hilton and some of these other guys were going to really be big contributors. Donnie Avery chipped in, and they just got contributions from everyone. You know, they got contributions from their rookie tight ends, and everyone stepped up and did their job. Guys stepped up in the running back position. I didn't think that they were going to get a lot out of their backfield, and they did in certain games. And so I thought that this Colts team really played well with what they had, but they needed to upgrade if they want to take the next step. And so they went in free agency and have been aggressive, and I really like what they've been doing. And so I'll be using this board here. As you see, I have a comprehensive spreadsheet on my big board that has every team in the National Football League listed. And among the topics on this spreadsheet are players that were released, players signed in free agency. Then you have your re-signees, guys that you re-signed to your current ball club. And then you have players lost in free agency. You can't re-sign everyone. Some guys you can't see eye to eye with in terms of reaching an agreement with. And some guys you just don't want back. And so they hit the market, they find work elsewhere, and you move on. And so let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts. And I'll be using my board the whole time I'm talking to you about the Colts. And let's see what the Colts were able to accomplish in free agency that has me buzzing and has me feeling like the Colts are one of your winners of week one in free agency. I feel like the Indianapolis Colts really bettered their roster in this first week of free agency. So let's talk about what the Colts were able to do. Let's talk about players released in the offseason. And so far, they have Dwight Freeney and Tom Zbikowski as the two guys that they've released. You look at Tom Zbikowski, here's a guy that came over from Baltimore with your head coach, Chuck Pagano. He thought he was going to be able to be someone that they could slide into that starting safety role across from Anton Bethea and have him just work out. It didn't work out the way that they thought. They went out, they got a safety in LaRon Landry now, and so Tom Zbikowski became expendable. He's now gone. You look at Dwight Freeney, he's getting up there in age, and really what it all boils down to is he's making a lot of money, and he doesn't fit the 3-4 scheme in my estimation. I think he's a 4-3 defensive end. He's not a 3-4 defensive end or outside linebacker, and so he doesn't fit into the scheme of a 3-4 defense. He had to go, and it was as simple as that. So he's gone now. You free up some cap space, and that contract that you got from under in conjunction with the money you already had coming into free agency allowed the Indianapolis Colts to do what I'm about to tell you, which is free agent signees. Let's talk about them because there's a lot of them. The Colts were extremely busy, and they got a lot of value out of some of the guys that they signed. Again, it looks good on paper. They have to go out and perform, but they did not overspend. They did not go and break the bank for a lot of these guys. Some guys you could argue, yeah, they got a contract that was probably a little bit above market value, but at the end of the day, they got their guy that they were targeting. Let's talk about it. So you look at the Indianapolis Colts. They got Greg Toller, the corner from Arizona. I love this pickup. Here's a guy that this is the key for him, staying healthy. Can he stay healthy for 16 games? He hasn't been able to do so throughout his whole entire career in Arizona. But when he's on the field, this guy is a really good corner. I like his ability to stay with receivers. He's physical. He's long. I like Greg Toller a lot. You will too if he can stay healthy. He can be a very formidable corner across the field from Vontae Davis and the rest of those corners that you have in Indianapolis, Cassius Vaughn. You could have a very good secondary. And then we'll talk about the secondary in a little bit when we get to another guy that you signed in free agency, but you're going to like Greg Toller if he can stay healthy. Here's another guy that you signed, Eric Walden from Green Bay, outside linebacker. Doesn't get as much pressure on the quarterback as you would like. In his career, only 9 sacks in about 4 seasons of play. And so you kind of question if he's going to get pressure on the quarterback or not. I think he's a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback. He just has to work on his game a little bit more. He's very stout in the run game. He can set the edge. I think the Indianapolis Colts like that about him. Remember, your head coach is Chuck Pagano. He had a guy similar to Eric Walden in Baltimore by the name of Jarrett Johnson. And so he thinks that Eric Walden can be another kind of Jarrett Johnson guy, a guy that's stout at the point of attack in the run game, can set the edge, and can get the occasional pressure on the quarterback. And so Eric Walden might fit that kind of role in this defense with the Indianapolis Colts. You look at another guy that you signed in the free agency period, Gosher Charles from the Detroit Lions. Here's a guy that was wildly inconsistent with the Detroit Lions. However, he is a solid right tackle. He is an upgrade over what you had at the right tackle position last season. So I like the move. I think that this guy is going to fit in nicely. And one thing he won't allow Andrew Luck to do is get hit. Whether he gets beat or not, Gosher Charles will hold before he allows Andrew Luck to get hit. And look, sometimes that's better than allowing your quarterback to get ransacked and absolutely smashed. So Gosher Charles will fit in nicely in Indianapolis. I like the move. I don't know if the contract is a little bit more than you would have liked to have paid him, but it doesn't matter. You got your guy. It's an upgrade at the right tackle position. You need to protect your investment in Andrew Luck. This guy will help you do that. You look at another move that the Indianapolis Colts made, Lawrence Sidbury. I love this move. Not a lot of people know who Lawrence Sidbury is, and for good reason. He has not done a lot in the National Football League. He spent 3 or 4 years in Atlanta, really didn't do much. He's an athletic guy out of the University of Richmond. He did not do a lot when he got to Atlanta, and everybody saw the upside, the potential, but he didn't do anything. And he's a long, lanky, 6'4" defender. He's very athletic, very fast. He has all the measurables. If he can put it together, if he gets enough playing time, if he gives himself the opportunities, and look, it starts with practice. He has to practice well, show the coaches he belongs on the field. But look, the Indianapolis Colts had to see something on film to go get this guy in the first week of free agency. And I tell you what, I like Lawrence Sidbury. You will too. I'm telling you right now, if the guy can put it together, if he figures it out, Lawrence Sidbury can be a guy that can get you 8, 9, 10, possibly 11 sacks in a season. He's that athletic. And in a 3-4 defense, he was in a 4-3, I think, in a 3-4 defense. I think that suits him better. He could be a menace on the edges if you can get him to play with the potential that he has. Now, you look at another guy that you signed in free agency, Donald Thomas. Nice, solid pickup for the Colts. Again, another guy that not a lot of people know about. Indianapolis Colts picked this guy up from the New England Patriots. He was a backup guard last year for the Patriots, and he was instrumental in the Patriots really making a run because they had injuries to the interior of their line. And guess who filled in? Donald Thomas. He filled in nicely, did not miss a beat on offense, did the Patriots, and he was a large reason why. And so the Colts took notice, as many other teams around the league did, and they signed him up. And again, he's an upgrade over the guys you had at guard last season. And so, again, another guy that's going to step in and upgrade this line and help protect Andrew Luck and also open up some holes for the running game. You could use a shot in the arm in the run game. Your running game wasn't all that effective last season, and so he's going to help that out as well. And so here's some upgrades to this offensive line to protect Andrew Luck. I like what the Colts are doing. Again, so now we look at another guy that the Indianapolis Colts picked up, and here's a big move. LaRon Landry. You need an enforcer in the back of your defense. And look, LaRon Landry, when healthy, one of the best safeties in the league. Most athletic. He's a freak. He looks like the Incredible Hulk. He's huge. It looks like he eats weights for breakfast. The guy runs a 4.3 40. He's a freak athletically on the football field. Now, I'll tell you one thing that will rub you the wrong way. You might be down in a football game 27-17 with 3 minutes left on the clock. He makes a big hit. He's going to get up. He's going to talk trash. That's his game. And it's going to rub you the wrong way sometimes because that's who he is. He pumps himself up mentally by talking trash to the opponent. Sometimes teeters on the edge of getting a 15-yard penalty for taunting, but that's his game. And sometimes you're going to say, hey, LeBron, just go back to the huddle. But you're going to love this guy if he can stay healthy. Again, I keep saying that with these guys that you picked up because that's the key with them. Either they need to tap into the potential or they need to stay healthy, but that's how you get guys on the cheap. Other teams around the league are a little wary. You go out and you take the risk. I like the Colts doing that, and LaRon Landry will pay off big dividends for you if he can stay healthy. This is a guy that's going to shore up that secondary. And I was talking about it earlier, how this secondary could be a very formidable one. You look at the guys that you have now in Greg Toller, Vontae Davis, Cassius Vaughn, and you look at the safety position with Anton Bethea and now LaRon Landry. You could have one serious secondary back there, and the front seven is coming along. You're making moves to help that front seven along. This could be a defense that starts to round into shape, and you know your head coach is a defensive-minded head coach. Chuck Pagano wants this defense to be physical, fast, tough, much like the Baltimore Ravens defenses that he coached. And so I think he's starting to bring guys in that can help him get that vision and make it come to fruition in Indianapolis. You look at another guy. Look, I told you they were busy. We're not done yet. You look at the next guy that the Indianapolis Colts went out and got. Ricky Jean Francois. I love saying that. Here's a guy that's going to help this 3-4 defense along immensely. He's very versatile along that defensive line in the 3-4 defense. He can play defensive end. He can play defensive tackle. You're going to love Ricky Jean Francois. I love saying that. And this guy is going to come in, be physical, stout at the point of attack, and he can get a little bit of pressure on the quarterback. You're going to like him. This is a very solid pickup in a long list of solid pickups for the Indianapolis Colts. You can't tell me you're not impressed with what the Colts were able to do in the first week. All of this is in 1 week of free agency, and a lot of this came in the first 2 to 3 days. And so the Indianapolis Colts getting it done in free agency. Let's move on to guys that they re-signed. And look, sometimes you need to take care of your own as well. They went out and they got a lot of guys through free agency, but sometimes you have to take care of your own. Let's talk about some of the guys they had back. Darius Butler, cornerback, another guy that you keep in the mix. And I talked about this secondary. Here's a guy that's going to continue to add to that. He was there before. He was a guy that made plays for you last year, got about 4 picks. 2 or 3 of those went to the house. Here's a guy that's making plays for you. He's back in the fold. This defense is shaping into form. You look at Pat McAfee. You franchise this guy. He's a punter. You franchise him. Look, sometimes you got to franchise a punter, man. There's nothing wrong with that. And so you want to keep your guys in-house. You wanted Pat McAfee bad enough. You made sure he stayed in Indianapolis, couldn't work on a long-term deal. So you did the short-term option. Slap the franchise tag on him. He'll be back with you in the 2013 season. Now we talk about guys who you lost in free agency, and you lost a few. But again, when you go out and make all the moves you made, you can afford to lose some guys. There's only one guy on this list that I say is really going to hurt because he really stepped up for you. We'll talk about him when we get there. Let's go down this list, though. Moises Foku. Here's an outside linebacker that I feel like he's replaceable. And so he's gone. He's in Tennessee now. He's still in division with a division rival in Tennessee. And so Moises Foku gone. I don't think you'll really miss his presence on the football field. You look at another guy you lost, Gerard Powers. Here's a guy that was a solid corner for you. But again, with all the moves that you made at the cornerback position, keeping Darius Butler, going out and getting Greg Toller, this guy became expendable. And so I don't think you feel that bad that Gerard Powers is no longer on your football team. You look at another guy that is gone, Drew Stanton. This one kind of hurts because you want a backup quarterback. He was a solid backup. He's not a world beater, but then again, how many backup quarterbacks in the league are? He was solid. He knew the playbook. I say that it's a tough loss because it's a backup, and now you got to go fishing for one. You need a backup quarterback. You got to have one in this league. He's gone on to Arizona. He followed basically your head coach, but he was your offensive coordinator a season ago, Bruce Arians, to Arizona. And so he's going to be teaching other quarterbacks the offense because he already knows it. And so you lose Drew Stanton. You're going to have to replace him with another backup quarterback. Hopefully you find a guy that's solid that can come in, learn the offense, and get acclimated to what you're trying to do in Indianapolis. You look at the last guy that you lost on this list, and this is the one that I think impacts your offense the most, Donnie Avery. I thought he was going to be back. He really played well in Indianapolis, and he came out of nowhere. Again, he was a journeyman. He was a guy that was drafted in St. Louis. You thought that he was going to really be good for the Rams. Didn't work out. He tore his ACL. The Rams got rid of him. He came back. He became a journeyman, was in Tennessee in another stop. Finally landed with the Colts. Andrew Luck shines him up. The Colts really give him to play well in the 2012 season. Thought he was going to be back. He took that play that he had and parlayed it into a deal in Kansas City, and now he's gone. Thought he should have been back in Indianapolis, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And so now you're going to have to find a guy that can come in and replace him. You have a lot of guys on this roster. Maybe a guy like Brazil might come in and step up, a rookie you drafted last year out of Ohio. Maybe he'll come in and play and really step up and give you the production that you're looking for out of that slot position where he was really a menace last year, was Donnie Avery. And so you're going to miss him, but he's gone, and so you can't really lament it. He's gone. Now you have to move on and find someone else to replace him. And that's the Indianapolis Colts in week 1 of the market. Wow, were they busy or what? This team right here, to me, by far the best in this division in terms of what they were able to accomplish in week 1. They really had a fabulous week, and I really love the direction the Indianapolis Colts are going in. So now we move on to the next team in this division, and we'll be talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars next. Stay tuned as we talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars here in the market.
Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay, so now we're talking Jacksonville Jaguars football here in the market. And here's a team that really needs to make some upgrades to their roster. It's no secret the Jacksonville Jaguars need to acquire more talent on their team. And they have a new regime now, and so things are going to change. There's going to be a lot of turnover, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second as we start to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. But you got a new GM in David Caldwell. You have a new head coach in Gus Bradley. Things are going to change. They're going to try to bring in players that fit what they want to do, and Gus Bradley has already said it, and he didn't study, didn't mince words. He said, look, I want a fast, physical, long, aggressive defense. And he wants it to look a lot like the defense he coached in Seattle. He wants long, physical guys that can run, that can hit, that can tackle. And so he's going to start to try to build that kind of defensive mentality in Jacksonville. And you can tell right away, he did not waste time starting to get rid of pieces that he deemed dead weight, guys that were making too much money, that he didn't really see the need for them to be on this roster anymore. And so they're going to change things around. David Caldwell came in. First thing he said, hey, we're not getting Tim Tebow. And that's a very profound statement, because this is a fan base and this is a team and an organization that for a long time you wondered, okay, where's the fan base? All right, they're not showing up to the games. And you also wondered, does this franchise want to win, or do they want to get butts and seats? And if you want to get butts and seats, Tim Tebow's a guy that can do that. He's a polarizing figure. And so right away, David Caldwell came in and said, look, we're not going that route. We're not getting Tim Tebow. Anyone thinking that that's an option, get that out of your mind right now. And so that was a very profound statement for me. That let me know he's coming in, he's taking charge, and this isn't going to be some kind of sideshow. They want to win football games. They're trying to change this program around, and I like the way they're going about it. Now, they still have a long way to go. This team did not have a lot of talent in the 2012 season, so they have a lot of work to do, and they know that. They know they have their work cut out for them. And that's why they came in and they started purging this roster. And so in front of you, I have my handy-dandy big board, and on it, you see I have come up with a comprehensive spreadsheet of every team in the National Football League. And among the topics on this spreadsheet are players released, free agent signees, then you have re-signees, the guys that you sign back to your team, and then also players lost in free agency. So let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll be using this board as I talk to you about the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we'll talk about the moves that they've made in the free agency, covering all those topics that I just named. We'll start with the players that were released from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Remember I talked about the purging and the turnover on this roster? That's what happens a lot of times when you get new management, when you get a new regime in there. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are no different. They're turning this roster over, getting rid of a lot of dead weight that this new regime saw when they came in as guys that weren't getting it done, that they didn't need, that didn't fit what they are trying to do in Jacksonville. And so let's talk about some of the guys that are no longer going to be with the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's a nice list here. So again, they're not wasting time getting in there, getting their hands dirty and trying to turn this thing around. So you look at this roster, Aaron Ross. You just signed Aaron Ross to a lucrative free agent deal a season ago from the New York Giants when they won the Super Bowl. Ross was one of the first guys to leave that team and go seek greener pastures. He went to Jacksonville. He's no longer a Jacksonville Jaguar. They got rid of him immediately. So you look at another guy, DeJuan Landry. I thought he was a solid safety for you. He was a guy that was hurt sometimes, but thought he was solid. I thought he was a physical safety, something that I thought this new regime would covet. I guess they felt like he was making too much money. He just signed a deal. He was a guy that you signed in free agency, gave a deal to. I think they felt like he was making too much money and wasn't worth the amount of money he was making. They cut ties with DeJuan Landry, so he's gone now as well. You look at another guy, Guy Wimper. Here's a tackle. I mean, he's a guy that you can't really feel too bad about letting go. He's not a big contributor on this team. You can do much better than Guy Wimper, whether it's in a starting or backup capacity. He was a solid guy, but nothing earth-shattering. Guy Wimper gone, and it's not a big deal. You look at another guy that was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brandon King. He's a corner, solid guy. Hasn't really lived up to his true potential in the league. You cut him loose, and they went out and went and got some guys at the cornerback position, which made a guy like Brandon King expendable. You look at another guy that's gone, LaRont Robinson. And here's another guy that got a big contract from the Jaguars a season ago in free agency. They got him from the Cowboys. He never panned out in Jacksonville for one reason or another, whether it was injuries. And I don't think his mental approach to the game was what it should have been. And again, LaRont Robinson was a guy that was on the streets until the Cowboys found him, cleaned him up, and made him look like a very formidable receiver in this league. And so it's a reason why he was on the streets in the first place. And you kind of seen that in Jacksonville. When he was signed, he was always injured. And I don't think mentally he was where he needed to be and to help this team the way that he should have been with the money that he commanded in free agency. And so you cut ties with him. And I wouldn't be surprised if LaRont Robinson was done with football. I just don't know if he's mentally where he needs to be the type of player that some team out there will be looking for him to be. So those are the guys that you've cut loose. Now you look at free agent signees for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You went out and got Geno Hayes. Here's a solid linebacker. He's not going to knock your socks off or blow your doors off with his play. He's just a solid linebacker. He's going to get the job done. Again, he won't make a lot of plays for you, but he'll be where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. And I guess that counts for something sometimes. You won't always have all-pro and Pro Bowl players all over your roster. You need solid guys, and Geno Hayes is that type of player. You look at another guy that you signed in free agency, Justin Forsett. Here's a guy that I like a lot. Thought he was solid for the Houston Texans last year. It's always funny how teams in the division, they get beat up by a guy in the division. He becomes a free agent. They snatch him up. Here's an instance where this occurred. Justin Forsett with the Texans last year. Thought he had a solid season. Again, Arian Foster gets a bulk load of the carries. Then Ben Tate is next in the food chain. Justin Forsett got whatever was left, and I thought he did a really good job with the carries that he did get. And so now he's in Jacksonville. Here's another guy that you got from the Texans in Alan Ball, a corner, long. He's an athletic guy that really hasn't done as much as you think he should have been able to do in the National Football League to this point. He started out with the Cowboys, he moved on to the Texans. Now he's in Jacksonville. He's a guy that's athletic, can make some plays, but you always scratch your head because you look at him and you feel like he should be better than what he is, but he hasn't really played up to his true potential yet. Maybe in Jacksonville, the light bulb will come on and he'll start playing some really good football. You look at another guy that you got in free agency. I like this move a lot, probably more so than any other free agent acquisition you've had this season. Roy Miller, the defensive tackle from Tampa Bay. Here's a guy, stout at the point of attack. In Tampa Bay, he was really an anchor on that defensive line. He really was part of the reason why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, #1 against the run in 2012, Roy Miller was a big part of that. He's a guy that it's almost all but impossible to run against. Tough, stout at the point of attack. He can get the occasional pressure on the quarterback, but that's not really his forte. But I like his athleticism in there. He can get to the quarterback, give you some hurries, collapse that pocket. He's a big, physical, strong guy. You're going to love Roy Miller, and I think this was your best offseason acquisition to this point. Roy Miller is going to come in and immediately fit right in next to Tyson Alualu in that defense, and I think you're going to like what you have in Roy Miller. So you look at a guy that you re-signed, and this is your only re-signee, Antoine Molden, the cornerback that you got from the Texans a few years back. This is a guy that he's solid, and you like what you saw on film. And again, here's a guy, long, and I told you, that's what Gus Bradley is looking for, long, athletic, lanky corners. And Antoine Molden fits that bill to a T. He's going to come in, and I think he's going to get an opportunity to play this year, especially with Derek Cox moving on. He's going to get an opportunity. We're going to see what Antoine Molden can do with this new regime. Maybe they can coach him up and have him being a guy that might be able to start for you. If not, he'll be one of those guys that comes in the nickel and dime packages and all those sub packages and plays a role there. So now you look at the guys that you lost in free agency in Jacksonville, and there's not many. There's only two, but I feel like these are two guys that they made contributions on this team. Derek Cox, you know how I feel about Derek Cox. I think this was a guy that you should have held on to. I just felt like he was good enough as a cornerback on a team that doesn't have that many good players. He was one of the better ones. You should have held on to him. I know the fan base in Jacksonville feels like Derek Cox was always injured and he wasn't worth the type of money he was going to command on the free agent market. He signed a 4-year, $20 million deal. You could have ponied that up to keep Derek Cox. And okay, yeah, maybe he was a little banged up, but again, sometimes you need to keep your stuff. And this was a guy that I thought was worth keeping. He's gone now. You didn't really want him back, I don't think, that bad. And so he's gone. He's moved on. So the next guy you look at, Terrence Knighton. And this is a guy that underachieved in Jacksonville. If he keeps his weight down, he stays motivated, and realizes that you got to give it all you have every week, every play, every snap, every down, he'd be a menace along that defensive line. But every now and again, it just seemed like Terrence Knighton just checked out. And for one reason or another, you never felt like you were getting everything he had on the football field, every single snap. And so maybe in Denver, you'll get all of Terrence Knighton. And so we'll see if he plays better there, but he's gone. He won't be on the Jacksonville Jaguars roster. And frankly, Roy Miller, to me, is an upgrade over a guy like Terrence Knighton anyhow. So feel like you came out on the better end of that deal anyway by allowing Knighton to walk away. You got Roy Miller. I feel like you win. You win there because Roy Miller is a really good defensive tackle in the National Football League. And that's it for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not overly aggressive in free agency. They did make some moves. They let some guys go. They're cleaning house. They're bringing in guys, starting to try to build an identity in Jacksonville. And that's why you see a lot of these moves being made in free agency. And so out with the old, in with the new. The Jacksonville Jaguars are looking to try to build something with some substance coming up in the 2013 season and moving forward. They have a new regime. It's a new day in Jacksonville. Let's see if the Jacksonville Jaguars and their new logo can start making some things happen. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Week 1, weekend in review in the market.
Tennessee Titans.
Welcome to the market. You're in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. And we're here talking about the Tennessee Titans, the last team in the AFC South to be discussed today. And they were very aggressive, very active in free agency in the first week. And so there's a lot to discuss about this football team. And let's face it, they're very aggressive, very active for one reason. Their head coach, Mike Munchak, is up against it. This is it. Last call, last stand for Mike Munchak. They don't get it done. He was this close to being fired this offseason. And so he knows, I got to do it. I got to make a move. I got to make a push. I got to try and get some guys in here that can help me win now. If I don't make the moves necessary, if we don't get guys in here that can help us turn this thing around and turn it around quickly, I'm going to be out of a job. And so he realizes the sense of urgency, and you can see it in this first week of free agency. They went out and got guys that can make a difference immediately. So here's the board that I'll be looking off of and discussing the Tennessee Titans with you. And this is a comprehensive spreadsheet that I put together with every team in the National Football League on it. And among the topics on this spreadsheet are players that were released, free agent signees, re-signees. Those are the players that you re-sign on your roster. And then last but not least, lost in free agency. The guys that got away or you just allowed to walk and test the market who left for another football team. And so let's talk about the Tennessee Titans and what they've been able to do in free agency to this point. And I think that they've been very aggressive. And I think that they've upgraded their roster. There's no question about it. This is a team that needed to do some things in free agency to help this team along. And I think they've taken some steps in the right direction to have a better outcome in the 2013 season. So let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. We start with the guys that they released, and nothing really here to see. Mitch Petrus, Jordan Babineau, you're not going to miss either one of these guys, so you move on. You look at the guys that you signed in free agency, so free agent signees, and you were very busy here, and this is what you needed to be. I thought there were several areas that you needed to address. You knew there was a distinct possibility that guys like Derek Marks wouldn't be back, Jared Cook wouldn't be back, And so you needed to fill those voids, and you did it in free agency, and I thought that that was a good look. You also needed a number 2 running back. You got it in free agency, and so I thought that the Titans went out and addressed a lot of needs that needed to be addressed in free agency. And so you look at the guys that they got, Delanie Walker, right off the top. I think this was a huge signing. And you knew you were going to lose Jared Cook. He scared you away. You wanted to franchise him. He didn't want you to franchise him unless you were going to tender him at the receiver level. You didn't want to do that. And so I think that scared you away, and you just said, you know what, we're done with Jared Cook. Let him walk away. I think that he's one of the most talented tight ends in the league, but Delanie Walker is no slouch. He was behind Vernon Davis in San Francisco as the number 2 tight end. He's a guy that's itching and burning to get that opportunity to show that he's a starting caliber tight end in this league. You're going to give him that opportunity, and you're going to be very impressed with the athletic ability of Delanie Walker. You look at a guy that this was the one you wanted. This was your big fish. You wanted him. You were drooling and salivating over getting him in Tennessee, and Mike Munchak, being an ex-offensive lineman, wanted Andy Levitre in the worst way. And my gosh, you got him in the first day of free agency. Andy Levitre is now a Tennessee Titan. You snagged him away from the Bills. You paid a pretty penny to do so, but again, this guy was the best offensive lineman available in free agency, and that's saying something coming from the guard position. The guard position is one of those positions that it's unheralded. They don't get a lot of attention. They don't get a lot of the credit when things go right because it's the guard position. You know, the glamour position on the offensive line are the tackles, especially left tackle. And so the guards, they go unnoticed sometimes. But this guy is a mauler. He opens up holes. He's athletic. He can do everything you want him to do from the guard position. You want him to pull, he can do that. You want him to block in a zone scheme, he can do that. You want him to just go and maul the guy in front of him, he can do that in a power run scheme. And so the Titans got their man. They're going to be pleased with Andy Levitre. And I thought this was the guy that the Titans wanted all along in free agency, and they got him. So that's a huge signing for the Tennessee Titans. You look at Sean Green. You needed a backup running back. You needed a number 2 running back, a guy that could be a complement to Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson said, I don't need a backup running back. Yes, you do. Every team in the league needs another complement to their running back. The only team that can get away with not really splitting up the carries is the Minnesota Vikings. I feel like Adrian Peterson is a stud, but look, Chris Johnson needs another guy to give him a spell. You need that guy that's a power back that can get you the short yardage on 3rd and 1, at 4th and goal from the 1 yard line. You need a guy that can plow and get you that 1 yard, get in the end zone. Sean Green can do that for you. He's a tough, in between the tackles running back that's going to help your running game immensely. You look at another guy that you were able to go out in free agency and snag up, Moises Foku. You got him from a division rival in the Indianapolis Colts. Solid outside linebacker. This isn't a guy you want to start, but he's a nice rotational depth guy, can help you on special teams. That's going to be a solid pickup for you. Look at another guy that you got in free agency, and this was basically your answer to Derek Marks walking away. Sammy Lee Hill. Sounds like a serial killer, but he's not. He's a offensive line killer, is Sammy Lee Hill. And he played a pivotal role in the Detroit Lions being solid on that defensive line. Look, they have a slew of defensive tackles in Detroit, but those guys are often hurt. And when they were banged up, who stepped in and really held it down in the interior of that line? Sammy Lee Hill. He's a guy that you can plug and play, and I think he'll be a solid addition to your defensive line. And in Tennessee, you have an abundance of defensive linemen as it is. And so he's going to fit right in with what you're doing along that defensive line, and he'll be a solid piece. You'll really be pleased with what you get out of Sammy Lee Hill. So you move on to guys that you re-signed. And here's a big one. I thought Darius Raynaud was a guy that proved that he belonged in the National Football League. He started out the preseason last year as a guy that was a long shot to make your roster out of West Virginia. And he came in, he returned some kicks, opened some eyes, electrified in the preseason. You could not cut this guy after the preseason that he had. And so you looked at that and you said, hey, man, wow, okay. So he earned a roster spot. Then he came in and had a solid season, returned a couple of kickoffs for touchdowns. It was solid in the return game. He's a guy that you could also give the football to out of the backfield on 3rd downs, maybe throw a couple passes his way. He's a very versatile guy. So I thought this was a guy you needed to have back. You have him back. Good move by the Tennessee Titans to get a guy back. Because look, If you get a dynamic return guy, that's priceless. Got to hold on to him. He's exactly that. He's back in the fold in Tennessee. You look at another guy that the Tennessee Titans re-signed, your fullback, Quinn Johnson. He's a big physical guy, very athletic and versatile. You can throw the football to him out of the backfield. He can create holes for you and running lanes for Chris Johnson. I like Quinn Johnson. And you can occasionally throw him a bone and hand him the football. He's not that bad at that either. Like Quinn Johnson, like the signing. I like the way the Tennessee Titans took care of a few guys that they needed to have back with their franchise. Now we get to the guys that weren't able to come back to Tennessee. And there's only one guy right now, but we know this list is going to climb over time. But right now, it's only one guy, and that's Jared Cook Jr. And look, we knew he was going to leave because once that franchise tag wasn't applied to Jared Cook, there wasn't going to be a long-term deal worked out. He was gone. And so as soon as free agency took off, he headed over to St. Louis, signed a deal there. He was gone immediately. So you knew you needed to address that. You went out and got Delanie Walker. So really no harm, no foul done here, even though I think Jared Cook has the ability to become one of the best tight ends in the league. And I'm not sure if Delanie Walker has that ability. Sometimes Delanie Walker struggles catching the football, but he's very athletic. And I think if he can just get the consistency that is necessary from the tight end position, catching the football, I think Delanie Walker is just as athletic as Jared Cook Jr. is. Not as big, not as tall, not as long, not as rangy as Jared Cook Jr. was, but Delanie Walker can get it done. But you're going to miss Jared Cook. Let's face it. He was starting to get to that level where he realized I'm better than these guys that are trying to check me in the National Football League. He was starting to become confident, and he was starting to stay healthy. And that's a big part of being productive in the league is being able to play every week. And you saw the amount of catches start to grow every year. The yardage per catch was starting to get up there. He was starting to catch a lot of balls for chunks of yardage. And so you're going to miss Jared Cook. But I think if Delanie Walker comes in and plays up to his capabilities, that void will be filled very nicely by Delanie Walker. And so that's it for the Tennessee Titans. That's it for the AFC South. This division, very active in free agency to this point. I think the Titans and the Colts are the two teams that really did a lot to help their franchises, help their rosters improve for the 2013 season. And so they did the most damage, but if you have to give it to a team in this division, it's the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, they really stood out to me in what they were able to accomplish in the first week of free agency. Along with the Dolphins, I feel like they, and maybe the Browns, you could throw them in there as well, really had a very, very good, and the Eagles too. I don't want to leave the Eagles out because I felt like they did a lot to really improve their roster as well. But man, I tell you what, the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans really helped their rosters out. And they're not done yet. Free agency isn't over. The draft hasn't occurred yet. And so there's still a lot of time, a lot of ways you can upgrade your roster. And so I don't think that it's done by any means. I don't think these teams are done by any means. The Texans still have a chance to really get into the fray, upgrade their roster. I think Jacksonville, they're taking steps to upgrade their roster. They still need to do a lot of things to help this roster become a lot better than they were in the 2012 season. But I feel like the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans did the most in the first week of the free agency period in the market to really help bolster their rosters for this upcoming season. They really stood out to me in this division, and I feel like they really have done a lot of things and taken some steps to really become better teams in the upcoming season, and that's going to do it for the AFC South division in the market.
The market.